Jim Hansen is a retired member of the U.S. Army Special Forces and president of the Security Studies Group. He's here with us to assess the situation in Ukraine. Jim Hansen, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Good to be with you.
Now, Jim, you were a former U.S. Army Special Forces. You also understand politics very well. Strategically, based on what you've seen unfold, is Putin's strategy starting to make sense? Can you kind of see what his ultimate goal here in Ukraine will be?
I've known what his ultimate goal was from the beginning, and it was to gain recognition for Crimea, to take official control of the two Russian-speaking provinces, and at that point to use a further incursion into Ukraine proper as a bargaining chip to get sanctions removed and the rest of it. And I said that almost 2 weeks ago, and it's played out right now. The official Kremlin spokesman has laid those things, plus a piece saying that Ukraine should not join any military blocs such as NATO out as their demands. So I think this is playing out pretty much as Vlad expected, except for the fact that his military vastly underperformed.
Now, Jim, Putin recently made some comments that if Ukraine continues on the path that it is heading on, which is essentially defending itself, that it will be responsible for the consequences. Does this imply a complete Russian takeover of Ukraine? Is that a real possibility?
You know, if it was a real possibility, I think the Ukrainians have proved that the degree of difficulty was a lot higher than Russia had calculated, and that the Russian military is a lot less capable than Vlad had been told. So I don't believe it really ever was his goal to take and keep Ukraine, because I can't imagine many places other than Afghanistan that would have a more powerful and dangerous insurgency if you managed to topple their government. You might take it, you could keep it at a very, very high cost in blood and treasure.
Now, Jim, the U.S. has essentially given Poland the green light, Poland being a NATO member, to supply Ukraine with aircraft, fighter jets. How does Russia view this, and does this heighten tensions between the U.S. and Russia?
It absolutely heightens tensions between the U.S. and Russia, because those are, at some level, those are NATO aircraft. You know, I mean, Poland can give them to Ukraine and say, well, this is outside of our function as a NATO member. Putin does not see it that way and does not have to see it that way. And I think that vastly increases the danger. So I think whatever off-ramp there is right now with the Kremlin spokesman's offer to, you know, take what was almost a fait accompli. Crimea is definitely part of Russia at this point, for all intents and purposes. The two Russian-speaking provinces were in everything but name, and now they're asking for independence. And at that point, if they're independent, they will almost certainly join the Russian Federation. And then the idea of, you know, Ukraine becoming non-aligned officially doesn't seem like a big ask, given the damage and death and destruction being wrought in Ukraine right now.
Now, we've been seeing some video and some reports of Russian aircraft being taken out. What type of anti-aircraft capability does Ukraine have?
A lot more than the Russians were thinking they did. They've got Stingers and other man-portable devices. They've got some higher-level anti-aircraft capabilities. What they also have, though, is the Russians have been not particularly good at the tactics they've been using. I mean, one of the more famous shots is an attack helicopter being ambushed. And you can't ambush an attack helicopter unless it's flying a route you knew it was going to be on. So I think the Russians are making some mistakes, and I think the technology and the capabilities that Ukraine had and has been given have made it a lot more dangerous for the Russians to think they can fly unopposed.
Now, we've been hearing that there have been multiple assassination attempts on Ukraine President Zelensky. The Russians are famous for these types of things. How long will he be able to avoid these attempts, and how challenging do you think it is to elude Russian forces as they make their way into the capital city of Kiev?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be Zelensky. That's a dangerous job. I also think the Ukrainians have been very good about pushing information out that helps their cause. So whether there were actually 3 assassination attempts that he's avoided, or whether they said there were in order to gain support, doesn't really matter. It worked. And I think at this point, he does have a target on his back, and that's not going to change. Although I think if what Russia actually wants, and I believe it is this not quite a peace deal, but this land grab deal that they're proposing, then I think at that point Zelensky becomes a little bit less of a danger to them, and I don't think taking him out would be advantageous for them.
Former U.S. Army Special Forces Jim Hansen, thank you.
Good to be with you.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken is visiting Eastern European countries in response to the war between Russia and Ukraine. On Saturday, he also talked to China's top diplomat. Blinken is expecting China to condemn Russia, as Beijing often speaks about the sanctity of sovereignty. In an interview with CNN on Sunday, Blinken said he spent 1 hour talking to the Chinese foreign minister.
You know, China speaks often about the sanctity of this principle of sovereignty. We would expect China, based on everything it's said in the past, to stand up and make its voice heard. Its voice is very important in this. And 141 countries in the UN system came forward to condemn Russia's aggression against Ukraine and to stand up for Ukraine.
The United Nations passed a resolution last Wednesday condemning Russia's invasion. 141 countries, including the U.S., voted in favor. 35 nations, including China, Cuba, and Iran, abstained. 5 countries, including Russia, voted against. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy is calling on Congress to speed up weapons sales to Taiwan. He tweeted saying, so that Taiwan can safeguard their future against China. MasterCard and Visa have suspended their operations in Russia. Russian banks now look to Chinese financial services to support Russian credit card transactions. MasterCards and Visa cards issued in Russia will no longer be accepted outside of Russia, and the cards issued outside of Russia will no longer work inside of Russia. Russian banks are now turning to China's UnionPay system to issue new credit cards instead, also known as China UnionPay. The financial company provides bank card services mostly in mainland China. According to Russia's central bank, China's UnionPay also operates in 180 other countries. The Chinese system will replace suspended Visa and MasterCard services for Russian citizens. The Biden administration is asking federal employees to resume working from the office. Twice last week, the president urged workers to return to in-person work and to once again fill the downtown district and office buildings. His message on Friday was directed specifically at federal employees. Most have been teleworking from home since early 2020. The federal government spends several billions of dollars annually leasing office space. Most have been virtually empty since the start of the pandemic. Agencies which reopened their offices for limited hours to allow access have not seen employees returning. The lack of commuters has created a severe impact on small businesses in D.C., as well as on the public transportation system. And Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin extended National Guard support in Washington, D.C., due to the trucker convoy protesting President Biden's vaccine mandates and other restrictions. At least 1,000 vehicles departed a rally in Maryland and looped the 64-mile Capitol Beltway on Sunday, as well-wishers cheered on highway overpasses. Supporters waved American flags throughout their trek, originating in California and going across the country. Participants planned to visit Congress on Tuesday without their trucks. It is worth noting that the convoy, since embarking on the cross-country journey over a week ago, has been a peaceful protest.